Commissioner. I don't have any further witnesses. I guess I would like to make an offer of proof that's contingent, in a sense, on knowing the identity of the providers that were pinned on Exhibit H from the department. We don't know who those providers are at this time. I would make the offer of proof that Mr. Felgar could testify that there's at least one provider in Rochester, Terry Bennett, that has no privilege at Frisbie Memorial Hospital, and I'd like to make that part of the record. And then with respect to queries to Mrs. McCarthy about options with Assurant, another insurer offering marketplace or offering plans in New Hampshire, I would make the offer of proof that Mr. Felgar would testify that Assurant is not part of the list of carriers that provide insurance for Frisbie patients. So that wouldn't be an option for Mrs. McCarthy to preserve her Frisbie affiliated physicians.
So this is what you propose giving as an offer of proof?
Yes. What's that say?
Excuse me.
Okay. He has no, Mr. Bennett has no usable privilege at Frisbie Memorial Hospital. Mr. Felgar would testify to that, and he would testify to the fact that Assurant is not one of the insurance companies on the list of carriers for Frisbie.
Comment from?
Well, may I inquire, I'm not sure
Anthem.
on the second point what it means is not on the list. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, you'd have to explain what that means, Attorney, because I don't understand it either.
Shall I put Mr. Felgar on just
No,
to
you can
explain?
provide it to me as an offer of proof.
Okay, that's great. Essentially, Frisbie does not have a contract with Assurant.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And can we have a clarification as to the time that we're talking about, that representation being made does not currently have one, didn't have one in 2013?
Assurant and Frisbie do not have a contract as of now and did not have one in 2013, is what Mr. Felgar would testify to.
Thank you. Is there anything else from?
I don't have any more testimony or exhibits that I would like to put in. I would like to reserve the right for some closing remarks if we have the time. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of what Mr. Eggleton said. Can you repeat what you said, please?
Just a second ago?
Yes.
I just want to reserve the right, if we have the time, to make some closing remarks. Other than that, I have no evidence or testimony I need to put in at this time.
I would ask the department if they have any witnesses to put on.
Well, just to be clear, so the petitioner's case is submitted?
Yes, the case is submitted. Again, I just want to reserve some time for argument that the case is submitted.
Your Honor, the department at this time would move to dismiss this proceeding without any further action by the commissioner. The issue before the commissioner today is a very narrow one. It's really in two parts. Did Mrs. McCarthy experience an injury in fact? And the injury in fact that she alleges is that she had to forego a subsidy on the federally facilitated exchange in order to retain her providers through the Frisbie Hospital and Frisbie's contracted doctors. And the second part of that is, can the pathway network that Anthem has submitted to the department for recommendation to CMS, can that network in Stratford County be deemed adequate? Should it have been deemed adequate by the department in its recommendation, with the exclusion of Frisbie Hospital? And what we have heard from the petitioner who comes here this morning with the burden of proof. I mean, I realize it's a burden of more likely than not, but, you know, she has the burden, if you will, of moving those, the scales of justice, you know, in her favor. And the petitioner has demonstrated nothing this morning. What we've seen is that she's testified that all of her doctors that she sees right now through Frisbie are all located in Rochester. Okay, so she's in a very tight geographical area.
Let me stop you for just a
Yep.
second and tell you that I appreciate what you're saying, but that it is not my intent to dismiss this action at this hearing.
Then with that, Your Honor, I'll defer from further argument. I don't know if,
Well, just for the record, Mr. Hearing Officer, on behalf of Anthem, I was going to join in the motion to dismiss for the reasons that Mr. McCaffrey was going to set forth, because we don't believe that the petitioner has carried even her initial burden to demonstrate injury in fact, or that the Anthem network is inadequate for her use in Stratford County.
Again, as I said, it's not my intention to dismiss this action at this hearing, during the course of this hearing.
then we'll proceed with the department's case. Alex? The department calls the Deputy Commissioner Alexander Feldwebel. Mr. Feldwebel, if you have a seat right there, please, sir.
Okay.
Please state your full name
Would you
and
swear the
please,
witness in? You want to swear
you
the
know what,
witness in?
you're going to have to swear the witness in.
Sir, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the case now pending before us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Alexander K. Feldwebel. My last name is spelled Feldvebel.
You employed Mr. Feldwebel?
Yes,
Where were you employed?
at the New Hampshire Insurance Department.
And what is your current position at the insurance department?
I'm the Deputy Commissioner
And how long have you served as the deputy commissioner?
since 2000.
And what was your position at the insurance department, if any, prior to your appointment as deputy commissioner?
Before that, for 2 years, I was the health policy analyst for the insurance department.
And prior to serving as the health policy analyst at the department, did you have any other position here?
No, not at the insurance department.
So you joined the department in approximately 1998?
Yes.
Would you please summarize your educational background as well as your professional experience that preceded your joining the department as the health policy analyst in 1998?
I'm an attorney. I graduated from Harvard Law School in 1984, and then I practiced law for about 12 and a half years. For about a year and a half, I practiced in Texas at El Paso Legal Assistance Society, where I began to specialize in issues of access to health care for low-income people. Then I moved to New Hampshire and worked for New Hampshire Legal Assistance for about 12 years, again, focusing on access to health care and health law.
So is it fair to say that you've dedicated a large part of your professional life to issues involving the delivery of health care in New Hampshire, including health insurance?
Yes, most especially health insurance for the last decade or so.
As we know as insurance regulators, the world of insurance regulation can seem an arcane one to those who are unfamiliar with it. And I'd just like to spend just a couple of minutes providing a little background as to what the insurance department does. And so let's begin. The state of New Hampshire, the Live Free or Die state, was the first state to create an insurance department in the United States.
That's right. Yeah,
Do you recall the year in which our department was created?
1851?
That would be correct. Does the department have a mission statement?
Yes, we do.
And have you committed it to heart?
Well, let's try. See now, the mission of the insurance department is to promote and protect the public good by ensuring the existence of safe and competitive insurance, and a safe and competitive insurance market through the development and enforcement of the insurance laws of the state of New Hampshire, or something like that.
That's pretty darn close. Tell us what an insurance market is.
It's just a venue where sellers can come together with buyers for the purchase of insurance policies.
So at the farmer's market, people go and buy vegetables and maple syrup. At the insurance market, people buy and sell insurance policies.
That's right.
What does a safe insurance market look like?
Well, primarily, that means that the products that consumers are buying are reliable. That is, they're being offered by companies that are solvent, that have the money to pay the claims, and that the insurance company behaves in a way that is fair to the consumer. So all of the insurance laws that we enforce focus on basically those two things, the reliability of the coverage and the fairness to the consumer.
And with respect to on the company side, the most important thing being is that when a claim, whether it's for medical coverage or auto coverage or life insurance policy, that the company has the money to pay the claims when the demand is made.
Yes, that's what we refer to that as solvency regulation.
And there's a division at the insurance department full of CPAs who handle that.
That's right.
What is a competitive insurance market?
A competitive, well, there are a number of qualities of a competitive market, and a perfectly competitive market is actually pretty rare. But the most important qualities is that there be a lot of sellers and a lot of buyers, and that no seller or no buyer has the ability to easily determine price, that there's no barriers to market entry, so that the sellers can get into the market easily, that there's good information about the products, so that the buyers can tell what they're buying and make shopping comparisons, that there aren't significant transaction costs, that the products are easily comparable, and that there aren't economies of scale for the sellers that tend to make the sellers larger and larger and fewer in number. So those are all qualities of a competitive insurance market.
Is it accurate to say that the federally facilitated marketplace or exchange is a subset of a larger health insurance marketplace?
Yeah, the way we define insurance markets for health insurance regulation is really by the buyers. So we have the individual market, where the entity that's buying insurance is an individual, and we have what we call the small group market, where the buyer is a small employer, and a large group market where the buyer is a large employer, that is above 50 employees. And the New Hampshire Exchange, or the marketplace you refer to, is one form within the individual market and within the small group market where buyers can purchase coverage, but their buyers can also purchase coverage outside of the exchange in the individual market and in the small group market.
Now, is it fair to say that in New Hampshire that some insurance markets are more competitive than others?
Absolutely.
What would be an example of one of our more competitive markets?
Homeowners insurance, auto insurance, life insurance, lots of sellers, good information about the products. They're homogeneous products, easy to compare and evaluate, and nobody, has enough market share to control prices.
And what would be one of our less competitive insurance markets?
Health insurance, and
Welcome back, everybody. I believe it's the department's continuation.
Commissioner, before I call the department's next witness, I'd like to ask the department to ask the commissioner to take notice of a bulletin that is dated March 11th, 2014.
Is this the first introduction of this, or?
It is, and I'd just like
Gonna be used
briefly,
in testimony?
yes, it is. I was just going to briefly explain the relevancy of this bulletin and why we're requesting that it's either be accepted as a judicial notice or as rebuttal testimony. Mrs. McCarthy was asked questions by Brother Durham concerning her current Anthem policy. And there were some questions concerning notices that Mrs. McCarthy had received from Anthem regarding the cancellation or the renewal of that policy. And Mrs. McCarthy had testified that she had chosen not to renew the policy past August 1st, to accept the early renewal of that policy. And she, under cross-examination by Mr. Durham, had testified that if she had taken the early renewal of that Anthem policy, that the coverage would have been extended into December 1st of this year. And it was left with the impression that was left is that that would have created a 1 month gap instead of a 4 or 5 month gap, I guess a 1 month gap in her testimony. But what the significance of this bulletin is that the department has authorized, consistent with the federal government, has authorized insurers, in this case it's just Anthem, if they want to continue to renew non-ACA or non-compliant ACA policies for an additional year. Anthem, the department didn't require companies like Anthem to do that. It allowed them to do it. And what Anthem decided to do was to allow policies that were going to be renewed in the last quarter of calendar year 2014 to be renewed into the next year. So if, going back in time, Mrs. McCarthy had early renewed her Anthem policy and had extended her coverage to December of this year, consistent with the department's bulletin, the one that we're introducing now, offering it anyway, and Anthem's decision as to which policies it would agree to renew, Mrs. McCarthy could have avoided any gap in her insurance coverage. So that's the relevance of this in this case. It really goes to, frankly, to the witnesses, and I don't mean this in a mean way, Mrs. McCarthy, but it goes to the credibility of the witness as to this point as to whether or not she had to be without coverage outside the ACA for this 1 month period of December.
I will take that as official notice.
And just to indicate, this exhibit I'm referring to, the bulletin docket number INS 14009AB has been marked as NHID Exhibit I. The department will call its next witness, Michael Will.
Shall I swear in?
Please.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the case now pending before us?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilkie, would you state your full name, please?
Sure. Michael Onufri Wilkie.
And what is your position? Where are you? You're employed at the insurance department, right?
Yes, I am.
What's your position here, Mr. Wilkie?
I am Director for Compliance and Consumer Services.
And what is consumer services?
Consumer Services is really kind of the focal point within the department for the people of New Hampshire to make inquiries with respect to their insurance policies or prospective purchases of policies. It serves as the focal point for receiving complaints from individuals against insurance companies. And it also is a a unit which provides outreach to the public on general informational topics associated with insurance.
And when we say outreach here at the department, we're referring to education.
Education is a big part of it, yes.
And so you're Director of Consumer Services, but you've also said you're Director of Compliance. What's compliance?
Yes. Insurance companies in New Hampshire must file and have reviewed and approved policies and other forms before they can market and issue those policies in the state to the consumers. The one nuance to that is under the Affordable Care Act, where with health policies, not only do we review relative to compliance with state laws and state regulations, insurance regulations, but also with respect to the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, as passed, and the guidelines as issued by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Now, what are your specific responsibilities as Director of, leaving aside Consumer Services, as Director of the Compliance Division?
My direct responsibilities are the oversight of the compliance process and for the personnel within it.
And just in brief fashion, Mr. Wilkie, could you outline your educational and professional experience, especially as it relates to health policy, the distribution of healthcare services and health insurance?
Okay. I'm a graduate of the University of Connecticut, a business major. From there, I went and I worked with Connecticut General Life Insurance Company, a Cigna company, for approximately 20 years. My title in leaving was Vice President of Underwriting. From there, I worked for Physicians Health Services in Connecticut as Director for Underwriting and Actuarial Services. Moved on to Health Source, which is another HMO, as Director for Underwriting and Actuarial Services. From there, went to Blue Cross Blue Shield in New Hampshire, where my title when I left was Vice President of Corporate Initiatives or Strategic Initiatives, for which I was responsible for the development of HMO Blue within the state, also responsible for the provider contracts and relationship with the Rural Health Coalition, which is made up of the rural hospitals here in the state of New Hampshire. Soon after Anthem acquired Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Hampshire, I left and I went into a small consulting firm out of Maryland called Gig Consulting. In 2007, joined the Insurance Department as Director for Life, Accident, and Health. There's been a title change, but the responsibilities for the Life, Accident, and Health side have remained the same.
So you've been with the department for approximately 7 years.
Just shy of 7.
And it's fair to say that, you've devoted your life's work to the healthcare, health insurance industry.
Yes.
Mr. Wilkie, I'm going to represent to you that at the end of Mrs. McCarthy's case, there were certain offers of proof that were made by counsel for Mrs. McCarthy. And one of those offers of proof was that Frisbie does not participate with Assurant being one of the other carriers offering individual policies here in New Hampshire that might have been available to Mrs. McCarthy. And I asked you during the lunch break if you could confirm for me whether or not whether or not Frisbie did in fact participate with Assurant. Did you review that for me?
Yes.
And what was the result of your review?
The result of my review was that it shows that Frisbie Memorial Hospital is in fact a participating provider within the Assurant network.
And what did you do to confirm that fact?
I went onto the website for Assurant, went on as to find a provider, went for a search for Rochester, New Hampshire, and Frisbie Hospital showed up on the list of providers.
I asked you if you could print those screen pages. Can you bring those with you? I'm going to ask that this be marked for identification purposes only. I guess we're up to, where are we? J. Yeah, give that copy to Kiara, please, Patrick. So it's J for identification. Okay, what I want you to do, Mr. Wilkie, is I want you to explain to the insurance commissioner what it is, take him through this and how this demonstrates that Frisbie, contrary to the offer of proof that was made, does in fact participate with Assurant. So,
Right.
what the commissioner...
Commissioner, participation by a particular provider in a carrier's preferred provider network, and Assurant offers what they call a PPO plan here in the state of New Hampshire, can either be through direct contracting with a particular facility or through the lease of a particular network. Or it may be through a parent company or a sister company. Assurant is a time company. It also has a sister company called John Audit. So in searching through, as a consumer, I would go to the particular website. It identifies the various networks that participate, that Frisbie Hospital participates in. I went to the website, put in the information relative to Rochester, New Hampshire, and was able to find Frisbie Memorial Hospital as listed on the website as a participating member of Assurance PPO network.
Now, the fact that Frisbie does participate with Assurant would mean for Mrs. McCarthy that she could have obtained coverage in the individual policy through Assurant and retained all of her providers that are contracted with Frisbie.
All her providers, to at least include the hospital, yes. I did not look at the other providers. One would assume that they are participating as well. but
Well,
I-
in the
I'm not
document
familiar
here-
with their specifics.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, sir.
I said I did not look up the specific doctors because I'm not aware of which doctors that Mrs. McCarthy
On the
visits.
third page of Exhibit J for ID, we see Frisbie Memorial Hospital, right? With an
Mhm.
address of 11 Whitehall Road, and it says
Correct.
Specialties Radiology Center. We see Frisbie Hospital with a whole list of different specialties.
Right.
I mean, there are several of them. Hand surgery, hospital general, it lists,
It does list it by specialty, specifically to the provider. I do not know.
so for at least each of these providers here, these services would have been available to Mrs. McCarthy through an individual policy issued by Assurant.
Absolutely.
Commissioner, I would move to strike the ID off of NHID Exhibit J and have it introduced as a full exhibit.
We don't have an objection. I just want to offer a point of clarification that the offer of proof that was made on the basis of a list of patients by carrier that Mr. Felgar had. And I recognize, looking at this list, that Assurant is not listed. First Health is listed, which appears to be the entity that Assurant uses in this marketplace. And so to the extent that that resolves the matter, there are 13 or so patients at Frisbie Hospital insured by First Health. So Mr. Felgar's statement, if he had made it, reflects the fact that he didn't understand that Assurant was First Health.
Mr. Commissioner, if I might, does that mean, because I'm not sure exactly what that modification means, does that mean that Ms. McCarthy and her attorneys are stipulating, as I think the evidence now clearly demonstrates, that during the time frame that we're talking about, Assurant was an option for Ms. McCarthy to seek individual coverage? And-
Thank you for the question. I was going to ask for the same sort of clarification, just to be sure that we're all on the same page.
I don't think we can stipulate to that for the reason that it's not clear which specialty physician groups are covered when it says multi-specialty physician groups. Obviously, the hospital services are covered under this analysis, but we are not disagreeing at this point that Assurant offers a health plan through First Health that does have a contract with Frisbie.
Do you want to reserve the right to modify your offer of proof? Is that what you're asking?
I will. I don't, I'll have to look into it because I need more detail myself, but I don't think it's a, well, I would reserve the right to modify it.
If I might, Mr. Commissioner, I mean, this is really a significant point, and an offer of proof was made to the hearing officer with the CEO of Frisbie Hospital here, based on information that was given to counsel directly from the CEO of this hospital. And the department is now put into evidence with direct information demonstrating that, in fact, that offer of proof was incorrect, was not accurate, and that, in fact, the Assurant did offer the coverage that would include Frisbie in the network for Ms. McCarthy during this time. It's obviously an important point, given the fact that they're claiming that she was suffered injury in fact, and I think that this documentation shows that that's not the case. So at a minimum, I think the department should also have the opportunity to have Mr. Wilkie, either directly or at his direction, determine whether or not the providers were available. I just don't understand, sitting here today, how we don't know this, given what the offer of proof was that we that attempted to shut down that evidence.
I think there's a simpler point here, which is that an offer of proof has been made that has either been entirely, which I believe is the case, or at least partially, has been impeached and shown not to be accurate. And an offer of proof is something that an attorney makes, with the, upon his information and belief that those facts are true. And it's no answer to come back now. Their case is in. It's no answer now to come back and say, well, we want to modify the false offer of proof, or at best the incomplete offer of proof that we made earlier. It's in or it's out. Either this exhibit comes in as a full exhibit, the offer of proof is impeached, and the commissioner gives the weight to the offer of proof as he deems necessary, or if the petitioner, and I'm really referring to counsel because this doesn't so much, this concerns, I think, counsel, not so much Mrs. McCarthy. She didn't make the offer of proof, her lawyer did. But if you want, can salvage a little bit of, integrity here and call this what this is, which is a offer of proof that was made in error. Maybe it was an honest error, but it was made in error, and that's been demonstrated clearly here, Commissioner. And it isn't fair to us, to ask us to keep playing whack-a-mole here with this case here.
If I might just add on that, Commissioner, I didn't look at it that perspective, but I think Mr. McCaffrey is absolutely correct. The plaintiff has rested. Their case is over. And to permit them now to say, we made a mistake, we'd like an opportunity to correct our offer of proof, I think would be inappropriate.
At a minimum, I think we deserve the opportunity to determine, because I don't see on this paper where Mrs. McCarthy's physicians group is actually stated. So at a minimum, we deserve an opportunity to examine this document and determine whether or not it actually does provide coverage for her under the circumstances, since that is the central point being raised by Mr. McCaffrey's rebuttal evidence.
I think the opportunity is to cross-examine the witness when that's appropriate, at most. That's how it usually works.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good result. I would suggest that that's the route that we take, because the petitioner's case has rested.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. I'm going to place in front of you, Mr. Wilkie, 4 exhibits. And Commissioner, these have been marked as NHID Exhibit A, NHID Exhibit A2, NHID Exhibit B, and NHID Exhibit B2. Except I just realized that these are my copies, you're not getting those. They're all my secret notes.
Okay.
Okay, now you have them all.
Did you want this one too?
Okay, Mr. Wilkie, let's start with Exhibit A. Do you have that there?
Yes.
Take a look through it, please. When you've had a chance to look through it, I'm going to ask you if you recognize the documents that are contained in that exhibit.
Okay.
You recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is it, sir?
It's the Managed Care Accessibility Analysis from Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Hampshire for its membership. It's dated May 14, 2013, and it lays out the membership against specific providers in what looks like an extracted version for Stratford County.
How about Exhibit A2? You have that in front of you? That would be one of the spreadsheets, sir?
Yes.
What is Exhibit A2?
It's the May 31st, 2013 Anthem Pathway Network filing, whose exhibits reflect for behavioral health, professional services, and facilities for Stratford, Carroll, and Belknap County.
Now, I'm going to ask you with that particular exhibit, Mr. Wilkie, if you would refer to, and we don't have the page numbers here, but if you look through, you'll see where the listing of medical providers begins.
Yes.
You have it?
It's in alpha order, yes.
And I just want to ask you about the columns that run across the top. So over on the left, we see the last and first name of the provider, right?
Correct.
And then there is a practice name, right?
Yes.
Address, and that includes street and city address.
Correct.
Originating, or it says R-Ridge Specialty.
Yes.
Then there's something called Specialty Number 1.
Yes.
Right? And there's another category, another column, PCP categories.
Well, you're looking at B1, PCP categories. Oh, further on.
Oh, you're in behavioral health.
Right, okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
You wanted to go
That's
all
why
the
we're
way.
doing this.
It would say the same thing, but just for a different.
This is for, right, because on the index, it's behavioral health and then professional, right?
Right.
So now you see professional, and then you see where
Yep.
it's PCP categories.
Yes.
And right next to PCP categories, there's a column that says accept patient, right?
Yes.
And if you look below, you see that there are Ys and a lot of Ys, and then there's an N down here. So we will assume that Y means yes and N means no. That's fair?
That's correct.
And then there's an indication of the county,
Correct.
and then the associated facility.
Correct.
If you would direct your attention, please, to what's been marked as NHID Exhibit B, one of the bound volumes. Ask you again to take a few, well, not too long, take long enough to look through that and be able to identify it accurately. You are under oath.
This is similar to Exhibit A. Something for Exhibit B is the Managed Care Accessibility Analysis for June 17th, 2013. Again, it appears to be representing the specialties being matched up against the members within Stratford County, with Stratford County being extracted from the totals.
And again, if you take a look at Exhibit B2, I'm going to ask you to look at that and identify that.
This is a June 24th submission of the Anthem Pathway Network supplemental filing, and again, it's for Stratford, Carroll, and Belknap counties, and it's a provider list for behavioral health, PCP, specialists, and the hospitals.
Now, Mr. Wilkie, is my understanding correct that Exhibits B and B2 were intended to supplement Exhibits A and A1?
Yes.
And taken together, do the 4 exhibits that you have in front of you represent Anthem's network adequacy filing for the Stratford County service area?
As of that point in time, yes.
Now, I want to, really now, we're going to get to the heart of the network, of the department's work in relationship to its review of network adequacy. And I'm going to ask you in just a moment we're going to look at a couple of areas as just examples of what review was done and what the conclusions of that review showed. I feel like I should be at a prize fight, round 2. Okay, Mr. Wilkie. INS 2706, right? Sets the standard, that's one of our rules.
Yes, it is.
And INS 2701 is the rule that deals generally with network adequacy. You know that, right?
That's accurate.
And this subsection of that 06 has the standards for geographic accessibility.
Correct.
Right? And you see this asterisk here?
Yes, sir.
And the asterisk relates to a line on the bottom.
Yes.
And the line reads, rule requires geographic access for only 90% of the enrolled population within each county or hospital service area. Now, the Deputy Commissioner went through some of this earlier today, but why don't you just briefly translate that into English? What's that mean?
What it says is, from the rule of 90%, is that the membership within a particular catchment area or in a county must meet or exceed 90% when matched up against the participating providers in order to meet the network adequacy standard.
So as long as 9 out of 10 individuals in a particular service area are meet the geo-access rules, then the network is in compliance with 2701.06.
Yeah, I think what's important to understand as far as this is laid out, it does not go to the individual. It really looks at the entire population, whether it being defined by the general population or in the case of Anthem with its insured population for this.
And when you say it doesn't go to the individual, what you mean by that is that if we took someone like Mrs. McCarthy, and I don't think the evidence shows this, but if the evidence were to show that somehow the geo-access, she was not within these geo-access areas, that in and of itself would not mean that the network did not comply with our network adequacy requirements.
That's accurate.
Because she could be one of that 10% who are allowed to be outside the geo-access area.
That's accurate. The rest of the chart shows really 4 of the specialty categories as identified within our rule, INS 270106, and it talks about PCP, which is primary care physicians, cardiologist, which I'm presuming represents all specialties, specialists that are out there.
Just on that point, the time, this is time, not and distance. This is a requirement of time or distance, right?
This is a time or distance standard that's on the right-hand side of each of these 4 specialty categories. That's correct.
So with PCPs, a patient would have to be, and I think it's supposed to be 2 PCPs, but within 15 miles or 40 minutes.
Well, the 2 PCPs that you reference are within a particular county. It's open practices that are accessible. So in this particular case, what they're looking to do, or what our standard really tries to do, is match up an individual by zip code against a zip code, in this particular case for a primary care physician, to see what in essence is the mileage difference. Again, looking at an aggregated number of memberships, it looks at the average mileage between the zips of the providers and the zips of the individuals.
And as I said, as you noted, cardiologist is a specialty, but there are other specialties that are specified under the rule.
Yes, there are, and this represents the majority of them. Not listed on here, a trauma center. We have 1 trauma center in the state. Certain high-end intensive surgical services, a thoracic surgery would be included. Mental health is a category in its own right too. But these are 4 of the categories that are most representative.
Now, if we were to look at 2701, at the different geo-access requirements, there is a specific distance and time requirement for each of those specialties, right? There
Yes.
are many more than these 4 that are here.
Yes.
And what is in Exhibit A and Exhibit B is the managed care accessibility analysis that Anthem submitted to the department, so we could evaluate whether or not, in this case, we're talking about Stratford County, whether or not the network was adequate as to Stratford County.
Yes.
Okay, so let's take a look at with these 4 categories that are on this board. Let's use these as an example. So I'm going to refer you, please, Mr. Wilkie, to Exhibit A at page 61. Do you have that?
Yes.
And what are you looking at there?
What I'm looking at from this is the managed care accessibility analysis for May 14th, and it represents the primary care providers on their proposed narrow or pathway network.
Okay, and if you look at the second page of that report, which is on page 62 of Exhibit A, what's that?
That there's a map, and then you have a county detail of information that's provided on the page after that.
All right, now, if you look at the third page, this page has been redacted. It indicates on the left all of the counties of New Hampshire, right?
Correct.
And then there are data columns that say total number of employees, all employees, percentage within, without, and then average distance to providers. But the only data that's been left on this page, and in this case we're referring to Exhibit A at page 63, is the data for Stratford County, right?
That's correct.
Now, employees, at the top of the page, it states primary care providers, proposed narrow network, Anthem, BC, BS, New Hampshire, all NH members, Feb 2013. You see that?
I do.
And my understanding is that it's just a matter of the way the Anthem system runs, is that the system calls the members, which includes individuals as well as small group members, it calls them employees. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, I don't know if it's Anthem system itself or a software vendor for which it contracts through, but that's accurate, that the total number of employees here is really representative of the title on top are all New Hampshire members.
Right. Now, looking at this document, at Exhibit A, page 63, what does this tell you regarding whether or not, with respect to primary care providers, Anthem was their pathway network? I mean, that's a bad question. Let me try it again. What does this report tell you regarding the adequacy of Anthem's pathway network as in respect to PCPs in Stratford County?
for the PCPs in Stratford County, the Anthem network exceeded the 90% minimum standard and in fact came in at 100% matchup.
What about the average distances for the two providers that are required?
At 2.4 miles and 3.0 miles, that's well within the 15-mile standard as set forth under 270106.
I would refer your, direct your attention at this point, still in Exhibit A, to page 22.
Yes?
Would you identify this document for us, please?
This too is the managed care accessibility analysis is submitted by Anthem, representing its members as of May 14, 2013. This report is on the accessibility of cardiologists on the proposed narrow network or the pathway network.
Right. I would again direct your attention to page, or not again, but I direct your attention to page 24.
Okay?
What I would again ask you is, looking at the information that's on page 24, what does this report tell you concerning the adequacy of Anthem's pathway network with regard to cardiologists in Stratford County?
This tells me that Anthem's participating providers against the membership within Stratford County matched up so that 100% of the members were within the standards that we've set forth under 270106. And if you see that's 100%, and then you have the mileage at 7.5, again, the cardiologist, what we're looking for from the standard is 45 miles,
So well within the standard.
well above the standard.
I would, same exhibit, Exhibit A, direct your attention to page 31. Would you identify, please, what's in Exhibit 31?
Exhibit 31, again, is the Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield submission for managed care accessibility analysis. The accessibility is for licensed acute care hospital, the proposed narrow network or their pathway network.
And would you look at page 33 of Exhibit A?
Yes.
Okay, and ask you the question I've asked you twice before now, with regard to the adequacy of Anthem's network as it concerns licensed acute care hospitals in Stratford County. What does this report tell you?
It tells me that 100% of the membership matched up against the participating acute care hospital was within the standard of 45 miles.
Same exhibit, Exhibit A, page 70.
Yes, sir.
Would you identify this document, please?
This is the Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield Managed Care Accessibility Analysis is submitted on March 22nd. This is for diagnostic services for the proposed narrow network or the pathway network.
And if you refer to page 73 of that, I beg your pardon, page 72 of that document. You there?
Yes, I am.
And what does the information on page 72 tell you regarding the adequacy of Anthem's network vis-a-vis diagnostic services in Stratford County?
Again, with respect to the diagnostic services, at 100%, it exceeded the standard as set forth in 270106.
Now, Mr. Wilkie, we could go through both volumes, Exhibits A and Exhibit B, in each geo-access report. But instead, what I'd like to ask you is this. Have you reviewed, we've talked about 4, have you reviewed the remainder of Anthem's geo-access network adequacy reports for all of the specialties and services detailed in INS 2701?
Yes,
This is part of your job as a Director of Compliance,
part
right?
of my job as Director of Compliance.
And, all right, based on your review, if we were to go through each one of those right now, and certainly the commissioners free to do that later, what would the commissioners see? What did they show regarding the adequacy of Anthem's network, the pathway network in Stratford County?
It met or exceeded in each of the categories the requirements as set forth by our standards within our rules, 270106, with respect to the distance and the membership of the program.
Does the New Hampshire Insurance Department have the ultimate authority to certify or approve the network of Anthem or any other provider who comes into the federally facilitated exchange? Do we have the authority to approve or certify any network for use on the exchange?
We do not.
And who does?
The federal government does. Actually, the approval process, the compliance folks, as I mentioned before, in the responsibilities of compliance, review state and laws, insurance laws and rules, in addition to having to review the federal guidelines under the Affordable Care Act, and with that review to include additional information such as network adequacy and all, is submitted to SOCIO, which is the insurance arm of CMS. It's the Center for Consumer Center for Insurance Information and Oversight, SOCIO. They are the ones that have the decision-making authority to either grant certification on a particular plan or to reject that plan.
So the insurance department, I guess this gets submitted to, our review gets submitted with a recommendation?
We make
SOCIO?
we make a recommendation based on our review as to whether or not certification should be granted at the federal level.
And what action did SOCIO/CMS take on the department's recommendation?
SOCIO certified the product for offering on the federally facilitated New Hampshire marketplace. They approved it.
And if the commissioner were to determine as a result of this hearing that the network was inadequate, and would the department have the authority, as far as you know, to retract that certification on behalf of CMS?
I think we would be required to notify CMS that there was a change of position, but no, that authority is really in the hands of the federal government.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'm not quite done, Mr. Miller. So I am looking at James, what am I looking at?
Yeah, the
here?
provider lookup website, and then if you scroll to the top, it's the listed providers for First Health, which Mr. Wilkie's assistant looked up for him, I guess, and it has Alexander Geller listed as a provider for First Health.
Can you just confirm that, and I'll make a representation to you, that Mrs. McCarthy testified earlier that her primary care physician is Alexander Geller of Rochester Internal Medicine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I keep trying to do that too.
Use the arrows.
We have to use the arrows.
My finger's not
I
working.
know, with our phones. Yeah, you see that it's
Yep.
First Health Provider Online Network?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You see that, Commissioner? All right. These are the run line regarding the exhibit that's been marked as, is it J?
J.
J. Okay, so if we scroll down, there's a list of the providers, and this is Assurant. And we see is it down below, would that go, there he is. We see Alexander Geller on the list. And there was a testimony earlier that Dr. Geller was Mrs. McCarthy's PCP.
Would you show that to Attorney Eggleton as well,
certainly will.
please?
Yep.
And we'll need a printed page if you will,
All right, and
at some point.
whose is this? Did you get that, we need it printed, some screenshots or something? Thank you. Commissioner, if I beg your pardon, sir. When we get what I'd like to do when we receive the hard copy of what was just shown to the witness and to you is to mark that as NHID J1. And we're seeking to introduce that as a full exhibit.
No objection.
No objection.
Hi, Mr. Wilkie. My name is Jeremy Engleton. I represent Mrs. McCarthy.
Good afternoon.
You had addressed a point just at the end of your testimony where Mr. McCaffrey asked you whether or not you have the power as an agency to decertify something that CMS has already certified. And I think you said that you'd have to put them on notice, but you wouldn't have the power to decertify something. Is that correct?
We've never gone through a decertification. As I understand the process is that we would have to notify CMS, Sociale, as part of CMS, that there was a deficiency that was spotted or there was a termination that was occurring, and we would go from there.
And would you take steps as an agency to ensure that the deficiency was addressed within the context of New Hampshire law?
To the extent there was a deficiency under New Hampshire law, we would, as market conduct regulators, work with to see that the remedy was created.
And after you presented your approved health plans to CMS, did they conduct any additional network adequacy analysis, or did they rely on what you did as a department to analyze network adequacy?
You'd have to ask CMS to what extent that they reviewed that.
But you're not aware of any additional analysis they might have done?
I was not aware of any additional questions.
Now, turning to the exhibit that you were looking at earlier, the Geo Access Report for Primary Care, which I think was on page 61 of the exhibit book that we were looking at. If you could turn to 63, please.
Okay?
So,
Exhibit A, excuse me, Exhibit A.
it is 63 of Exhibit Volume 1.
Yeah, Volume 1 is Exhibit A.
Thank you.
So we're looking at a number there in that first column, a total number of employees, 19,034 individuals, correct?
That's right, that's individuals, correct.
Okay, and then the next number is 100%. And I just want to understand your testimony. Does that mean 100% of these individuals are within 15 miles of at least 2 primary care providers?
This would represent that the 100% of the people were within the distance as specified.
So these 19,034 people, they're all within 15 miles of 2 primary care providers with open panels, is that correct?
Objection,
That's different.
It's 15 miles, that's misstating the rule, but it's 15 miles or 40 minutes.
Or 40 minutes.
Well, I actually have a question about that. In this Geo Access report, does it account for the time for these individuals to drive to these providers?
Does it provide for the time? To the extent, first of all, it'd be as the crow flies. So as far as any time to travel that the standard would be invoked, that would come into play. But the time aspect of it is really kind of as a default in this particular case. It met the standard from a mileage perspective. To apply a second standard, part of it was not necessary.
Okay, so
And it's
there
not
is
necessary.
no time to drive to the provider information in this Geo Access report.
In the report right here, it represents the average distance to providers.
Okay, and looking down at the bottom left section of that page, there's a access standard line. Do you see that in the bottom left, down by the box? I cannot.
Yes, I see it.
You see that? And that says 2:15. Is it fair to assume that that means 2 providers within 15 miles?
I'm not sure what that particular standard there
Okay.
is, what that represents.
Okay. Now, in order to establish the distance between all of these individuals and the at least 2 providers, I think you referred earlier to a zip code matching process. Do I understand correctly that all of the individual members' zip codes are in the system and all of the individual providers' zip codes are in the system, and then the software number crunches essentially to produce this result?
That's my understanding as well.
Okay, so at some point, somewhere, Anthem must have the zip code information for each of these individual members that are insured by it right now.
Yes.
Right? And presumably then, based upon that zip code information, you could determine on a town-by-town basis how many members are insured by Anthem in Farmington, say, or Milton. Is that fair to say?
We are looking at the,
I'm going to object at this point again. Council seems to be asking questions about currently. The timeframe that's focused on here is July of 2013. So I just want to make it clear and make sure that Mr. Wilkie understands the council asking about present time, which I think is irrelevant.
Duly noted. I'm asking about, at the time of submission, I think, the earlier testimony from Mr. Feldwebel was that Anthem was asked to rely upon its then current network, so before the narrow network was put into place, and the number of individuals in all their plans in New Hampshire as a basis for their population estimates.
let me clarify that, it was their membership within their products that was utilized to put up against a network that was brand new, which they had 0 members in. So this was kind of the largest, population that you could look at. And again, our standard is at the county level. And that's what we're setting up our standard in our measurements of the 90% minimum against.
Okay.
So your question to the towns is we would not be looking at it from a town perspective at all. Whether they had the capability or not is up to them. Our focus is on the county.
And I think you said earlier, in response to a question from Mr. McCaffrey, that the materials in these geo-access reports, together with the provider lists that were submitted, constituted all of the network adequacy filings submitted by Anthem. Was that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
This represents all of the geo-access that would have been filed relative to the network adequacy.
And were there other filings relating to waiting times, for instance,
Were there other filings relating to waiting times?
for members to access primary care, as an example?
One of the things that we look at relative to the Affordable Care Act and the change from a compliance perspective, we are really looking and applying, and I think we've made that clear within our bulletin that we issued in 2013, at those pieces that are really, prospective and that would not be, shall we say, contrary or in violation of the guidances given it by the Affordable Care Act. One of the pieces that is really challenging, I think, for us or for anybody is the fact that you're really talking about a proposed pathway network at that time that has 0 members. So as far as time to access, I guess, we were not looking for that. We didn't feel that on a prospective basis that this was necessarily information of value.
Okay. Now, if that's a prospective analysis, I understand that. The question I guess I would ask is, did you look at all at access standards for Anthem's current network, its then current network? In other words, the 19,034 people listed here in Stratford County. as, in the same way that you used that current network as the basis for your population against which you would determine geographic analyses, did you ask Anthem to produce any studies that it had done on waiting times for those individuals at that time?
Objection. The information being sought here it's irrelevant. What happened with respect to what review was made of a network adequacy filing outside of the ACA for all the reasons that have been discussed at great length today, first by Mr. Feldwebel, now by Mr. Wilkie, the retrospective versus the prospective demonstrates in and of itself the irrelevancy of trying to shoehorn into this case these standards that have been made out there, and used in other network adequacy reports. Now, I know Mr. Eggleton has said in his request for rulings, he has said it in various filings with the department, and I know he has said it to the press, that it's an easy matter to, the term he uses is to extrapolate from this pre-existing, network adequacy reviews, that can be done. But Mr. Eggleton's not qualified to offer that opinion. That falls, I can think of any number of experts who might be, but none of them have been presented here today as part of this case. So, this is the time when, here, Commissioner, when parties they can make allegations, but today they have to prove them. And there's just no foundation here for the question that's being asked in the line of question that I know Mr. Eggleton wants to pursue, because he's been saying this throughout this case since at least November 6th when they filed the petition. We're here to consider the adequacy of what Anthem filed on, last summer with regard to the pathway network that was going to be used on the federally facilitated marketplace. Any other review that was done and the application of New Hampshire law to any of those other reviews, again, for all the reasons that have been explained, is irrelevant and should be excluded. It's a waste of time.
Your objection is sustained.
Commissioner, if I might also just add, I know you ruled, but just to add to the record that there also is no foundation in the state's network adequacy rules and the bulletin that we're talking about for this type of a theory.
And that's all I have.
So, Mr. Wilkie, Mr. McCaffrey took you through exhibits A and A2. And then, he took you through 3 or 4 examples and then confirmed with you that you were familiar with all of the GEO reports, and you could confirm that there was either it meets or exceeds the compliance requirements under 2701, is that right?
270106, that's correct.
Okay, and I just want to make sure I don't think we specifically talked about B and B2, which were the similar reports, just later in time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you review all of those GEO reports as well?
We reviewed those reports as well. The supplemental, the second report really is, and it's not unusual for us to receive from a carrier. Networks are kind of evolving creatures. So,
But you're familiar with each of the reports in there, and can you tell us from your review, was there complete compliance with 270106 with regard to those GEO, the access to providers?
yes. Any deficiencies that would have been identified were not in Stratford County.
Okay. And you made reference in response to Mr. McCaffrey that the department made the recommendation to the federal government for certification. You recall that?
Yes.
And I just want to make sure the recommendation that you're referring to is the July 31st, 2013 recommendation, which is the act or order of the commissioner that the petition attempts to challenge, correct?
Could you rephrase that to the petition,
Sure.
our recommendation was made to the federal government on or about July 31st or August 1st of last year.
Of 2013.
And that process carried over for just about a week's time to get all the information into the federal government. So when you state July 31st, I just wanted to be clear that this was, it took us a multi-day process.
Right. And to your understanding, is it that decision by the department that's at issue here?
Yes.
And you were asked questions about decertification and I just want to ask you that the department, as the regulator of insurance carriers, including Anthem, does have the right, when it deems appropriate, to conduct market conduct exams that would look at issues that may come up on an ongoing basis for carriers' compliance with network adequacy.
Yes, we gave the authority.
And can you confirm for us that, in fact, Anthem provided all of the information and documentation that the department asked for during this network adequacy review in between April and July of 2013?
Yes.
And with regard to the applicability of Rule 2700, am I correct that the network, the basic requirements, the basic access requirements, if you look technically at the rule, only come into play when an insurer has at least 1,000 members in any particular county?
That's correct.
Okay. And obviously in this situation, between April and July of 2013, there had been no, Anthem had not sold any exchange products yet, and therefore they had no members in Stratford County. Is that correct?
That's accurate. They had no members within the product itself across the entire state.
So if you look at that criteria alone, those network adequacy regulations or standards wouldn't have applied to Anthem. Is that correct?
There were none of them on.
Thank you very much.
Witnesses dismissed unless the commissioner has questions.
Are there other witnesses?
The department's case is submitted, Your Honor.
What I propose we do at this time is take about 5 minutes or so, go to 2:30, and then come back, and I'll give you the opportunity for some oral closing arguments.
You know, if I may, Your Honor, Commissioner, if it'll be of use to you to hear closing arguments from the parties, I'm happy to make a closing argument, but this is an administrative proceeding. You've listened to it very patiently for the better part of, I guess, 5.5 hours or so. And you've offered us the opportunity to submit post-hearing briefs. We've already submitted preliminary requests for findings and rulings. I mean, I'm content to rely on a brief and the opportunity to revise our findings and rulings so they conform with the evidence that's been presented. But again, if it's of value to you, we're happy to make some closing remarks. But I don't feel it's necessary for the department.
From my perspective, I don't need them. I was trying to be courteous, grant you the opportunity if you so chose, but if you agree that we don't need them,
I don't know how.
I'm happy to take them and write
Brother Eggleton and
when I can ruminate on them more carefully and weigh them more carefully.
I don't have a problem with that. I think we've taken longer than anyone expected today, so we're happy to put our argument into the post-trial memorandum.
And on behalf of Anthem, we're certainly prepared to present an oral argument, but if the consensus is that we should do that in writing, we're fine with that as well.
That's great. Then I'd expect those in some written form with the update.
Could we?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
With the update on the rulings and findings.
Will there be a, if I may, will there be a post-file, will there be a post-filing scheduling order that's issued?
Let me take, like I said, suggest a
Okay.
5-minute break.
Okay.
And let me make sure that my counsel and I are on the same page. So 5 minutes, we'll come back, we'll finish it up. Okay, now it's my turn to talk.
Commissioner, just technically, if I might say,
You may say, technically, you may even say two things.
thank you. I think just so the record's clear, Anthem rests as well. We are not going to put on any evidence. We don't see any reason to do so. And then I'm just asking to confirm that I understand that the hearing's got to stay open for briefing and for some exhibits to be decided, but
I'm gonna go through that.
are we closing the evidentiary portion of it?
For today, yes. No,
I mean, I'm assuming that everybody's rested, there's no more
no,
evidence.
no more witnesses, right, that's right.
Or written evidence.
No, no, no,
Just briefs,
right.
Right, I mean, I think we're only waiting for that print, the
Right.
print screen of that one computer,
which we have right here.
and then we needed the map as well.
Right, but nothing new,
Nothing
nothing
new.
beyond what's
Okay.
that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is,
Is there anything else?
this we had a lot.
Does that answer your question? Matt?
Yes, thank you very much.
What I am gonna do for you, though, is to list the documents that you're all gonna be providing to me for our discussions today, and as well as the discussions that people in conference. Let me go through the list of documents, and please, if I have overlooked anything, let me know what it is that I've overlooked, or confirm the fact that these are the documents that you're going to submit. The first one are supplements to findings of fact and rulings of law. The second is a description of each exhibit that you've submitted that's been marked, so that I know the source, the author of the exhibit, the reason that it's being introduced. In other words, what is the exhibit intended to prove? Written closing statements, you've got the opportunity to provide those. Any legal arguments as to the exhibits or testimony as to any other legal issue relevant to this hearing. Written offers of proof, as we discussed today, and I'll go through those. Please, again, stop me if I'm not getting them accurately. First one, that Assurant did not contract with Frisbie in 2013 or 2014. The second, that Terry Bennett has no privileges at Frisbie Hospital.
Excuse me,
Yes.
that's not correct. No. He has the
I'm
walls.
sorry, I'm sorry, this is not your turn.
Okay, but.
Is there a need to
Yeah,
clarify
Jeremy?
that?
Yes.
Do you have clarification, Jeremy, that you'd like to provide us this afternoon?
I don't. I need to talk to my client.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I need to talk to
That's-
Mr. Felker.
that's fine.
I apologize.
We've marked exhibits 1 through 13 that were submitted by Mrs. McCarthy, but there are objections to these exhibits, and they have not been introduced as evidence. Mr. Eggleton, I believe you're going to be making an offer of proof on the admissibility of these exhibits, especially with regard to their relevance. Next, what I would like is for all parties to file within the next 2 weeks or by May 28th, unless you don't think that's sufficient time to put everything that you need to together. If you don't, let me know, and I'm happy to accommodate additional. I'm going to leave the hearing open for your question for purposes of accepting the information that I've just talked about. Any questions so far?
Mr. Commissioner, I apologize, but I understand that the hearing is being left open for the purpose of the submission of the items that were just listed. But are we all on the same page and correct that it's not being left open for anybody to submit further evidence?
No, there's no additional evidence. I won't accept additional evidence. I've got the evidence that you've submitted either by oral testimony or by exhibit, and that's the end of submission of evidence.
Okay, thank you.
All parties agree that that's where we're at?
Yes, I was just going to submit, if I may, Commissioner, the NHID Exhibit J1, that last piece, which we've been able to have.
Okay, now, what I'd like to do is to recognize some of the folks that have been here today, and thank you. First, I want to thank Mrs. McCarthy for taking so much time out of your day to come.
Thank you.
Meet with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to be heard. I appreciate it.
I want to thank the attorneys that really acted very promptly with regard to responding to some very tight deadlines that we had in place. I appreciate that this was at times a bit difficult because of some of the tight deadlines. And I want to thank you all for your efforts at doing this. Thank those that are attending the hearing for your courtesy and respect. Believe it or not, I don't think I heard a single cell phone call else did. You have better hearing than I do. Thanks to the press for being here and smiling almost the entire time. Thanks to Susan and the reporter the tape for us, as well as Sarah and Debbie and all of my staff, frankly, Kiara, for helping out with all of the paperwork and the scheduling and the organization that had to happen with regard to this particular hearing. If I missed anybody, I apologize, it's not intentional.